Are there marketing projects that you need done for your company, but you don't have enough time or people to help? Do you have a great business, but you're looking to scale? This episode is hosted by the founder of GetLeverage.com, Nick Sonnenberg. Leverage is the premier marketing platform that pairs you with a team of experts for any big or small project that you want to outsource. I can already tell, but you're feeling distracted. But this episode can help. Nir Eyal is a world expert at understanding distraction. He's the author of the Wall Street Journal bestselling book, Hooked, and has just released a new book called Indistractable, a guide that specifically covers how to regain control of your attention and life. In this episode, Nick and Nir talk how technology, company culture, and behavior is all fighting for our attention. Nir's insights not only give you the awareness of why you're so distracted, but steps on how you can make your attention more focused and controlled.
Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Sonnenberg, and today's guest is my good friend, Nir Eyal. Welcome, Nir.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So Nir is the author of a very well-known book called Hooked, and he has a new book that just came out called Indistractable, and I'm really happy to have you on the podcast. You're really a world expert at managing distractions and also what causes distractions and what causes people to get hooked to technology or other things. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today, and thank you for joining.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be here.
So do you want to just tell the listeners really quick a bit about the new book? I read it today, so I have some notes and some talking points for you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So the book is about why don't we do what we say we're going to do? I think it's a fascinating question. It's not a new question. It's a question that Plato talked about 2,500 years ago. The term that he used was akrasia. Akrasia is the tendency that we have to do things against our better interest. And so to me, it's a fascinating question. You know, if we know what to do, why don't we just do it? Right? We basically know that we should exercise, but we don't. We know we should be with our friends and family and give them our full attention when we're with them, but we don't. We know that when we get to work, we should do the hard stuff that nobody else wants to do because that's how we're going to get better at our business, but we procrastinate. We do something else. We check email. We look at the news. We putz around and we don't do what we say we're going to do. And I think this has really changed because in the past, you could say, well, there's a knowledge gap, right? That we just don't know what to do, right? So that's why you have to go buy a book or listen to a guru or, get some consultant to tell you what to do. But I would argue that for most of the things that we do every day, we basically know what to do already, right? Who doesn't know that a chocolate cake is not as healthy as a healthful salad?
Or that if you go to the gym and work out, that's probably better than not doing it.
Exactly. And that if you want to do good work, you have to focus on one thing at a time. Like, do we really need to buy a book to tell us that? No, I don't think we do. We know this stuff already. But the problem is we haven't figured out how to wrestle distraction. And so I figured, a few years ago when I started down this road of writing this book, that is the ultimate superpower of the 21st century, that, if you think the world is distracting now, just wait a few years. It's not going to become less distracting. If anything, it's going to become more distracting. And so if you can be the kind of person who lives with personal integrity, if you do what we say you're going to do, you are not only going to be a very hot commodity in the workplace, right? You're going to be the kind of person that people want to work with. You're going to live a happier, more fulfilling life because you are honest with yourself as you are with others. And so that's what Indistractable is all about.
Yeah, it was a great book. A quick read. I was worried I'd get distracted while reading it, but I actually knocked it out this morning without getting distracted.
Awesome.
I think as I was learning tips about how to not get distracted, it was accelerating my reading speed.
There you go. Excellent. Yeah, it's. I wanted to keep the book very conversational, very quick, and it's not bogged down by a bunch of very heavy anecdotes and. But I wanted to make it, very practical, but also very strategic, that if you get one thing out of it, it's going to be this 4-part framework to help you think about distraction. And therefore you can come up with your own tactics. I think strategy is much more important than tactics. Tactics are what you do. Strategy is why you do it. And so I really want to give people a framework that they can understand, that they could then utilize in their own lives and hopefully share with others.
I like the tactic versus strategy. One something similar to that is kind of the difference between efficiency and effectiveness that I talk about a lot, where effectiveness is doing the right things and efficiency is doing things right.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. There's a few concepts in the book that I really liked that I wanted to talk about. So one was that time management is just pain management. I thought that was a really interesting concept. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Sure. So if we want to understand this idea of why do we do things against our better interests, we have to start with this question of why do we do anything, right? Let's really start from first principles here. What's the nature of human motivation? And when you ask people, why do people do why do people do anything? What motivates people? Most people will give you some version of carrots and sticks, right? That human behavior is prompted by a desire to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. This is called Freud's pleasure principle. Unfortunately, neurologically speaking, this is not true. That's not actually what happens in the brain. The way the brain gets us to act is through one thing and one thing only, and that is discomfort. That, in fact, even the desire for something pleasurable, okay, right, even wanting to feel good is itself psychologically destabilizing. That when we say we crave something, that we desire, that we want, that there's a reason we say love hurts, because that is exactly what's going on in the brain. The way the brain gets us to act is by making us feel some form of discomfort, even discomfort longing for something that feels good. And so we know this is true physiologically. We know this every day, right? If you go outside and you're cold, you put on a jacket. If you come back inside and it's hot, you take the jacket off. If you feel hunger pangs, you eat. If you're stuffed, you ate too much, that doesn't feel good, now you stop eating. So that's physiological sensations, and the same holds true for psychological sensations, that when we feel lonely, we check Facebook. When we're uncertain, we Google. When we're bored, we check the news, stock prices, sports scores, Reddit, Pinterest, you name it. All of these things cater to an uncomfortable emotional trigger. And so that means if all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort, that means that time management is pain management. And this is what's so important, I think, about this book, is that I don't stop with the proximal causes. I think a lot of books on time management and distraction, and particularly lately, there's been a whole mess of books that basically tell you about how terrible technology is and how technology is melting your brain. And I don't buy it because those are just proximal causes. People have been struggling with distraction for a very, very long time. And it's always the latest technology that people say, this thing is the worst thing ever. It's melting our brains. We can't stop using it. We're all addicted. And that's never true, because the real source of distraction are never the proximate causes. They clearly play a role, but that's not the root cause. The root cause is that we turn to distractions like babies need pacifiers. We do it for psychological pacification. And if we don't face that fact, that the reason we are turning to our device is because we want to feel something different, we will always get sucked in by something. Right. And so that's why we have to start by the first step is mastering our internal triggers.
And if it's not an iPhone today, it's going to be something tomorrow, right?
Absolutely. And think about all the things that people are using as distractions, whether it's too much booze, too much work, right? How many people spend too much time in the office because they don't want to go home to their families that they're not getting along with? How many people, watch too much football on TV so they don't have to listen to their relatives? How many people escape with one thing or another because they're not comfortable in their present reality?
People escape with work a lot of the times too, to avoid thinking about personal problems in their life.
All the time. And so what we want to do is escape from this idea that, one technology is worse than the other. And, all this stuff is ridiculous. I think, not to say that I think tech companies shouldn't be held to account. I think there's a lot of things that tech companies, need to probably be regulated around when it comes to monopoly status, data incursion, political intervention. But when it comes to this particular question of, is technology hijacking all our brains, it's stupid and it's not true. And if anything, it's motivated reasoning, what psychologists call. We want to blame something. We always have and we always will, except the fact that it's not true. Right. And it's never about your iPhone. It's never about, the football game. It's never about the booze. It's always something deeper going on.
Totally. I love when I consult companies on their internal systems and operations, and people are like, Slack is the worst tool ever. It just caused so much distraction. It's like, it's never the tool. It's how people use it and how you think about it. And most of the time it's set up wrong, or they have the wrong notification settings, or it was just configured poorly with too many channels, public, too many people added to channels they don't need to be in. It's naming conventions are a mess.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Slack. I'm guessing you read that chapter about Slack,
Yeah.
and there's that whole section in the book about why distraction at work is a symptom of cultural dysfunction.
Totally.
That if you find yourself working in a distracted work environment, it's never about the device. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you do everything I tell you to do in the book, right? You become indistractable, just like I tell you. Half the book is about things that you can do for yourself. And half the book is about, the environments we work in. So there's a section on how to build indistractable organizations, how to raise indistractable kids, how to have indistractable relationships. So half the book is about things you can do yourself. Half the book is about things that you can do in an environment. Now, and the way I can prove to you that it's never just about the technology, let's say you do everything I tell you to do, you become indistractable yourself, but then your boss gives you a call at 7 p.m. on a Friday night and said, hey, did you check that email I just sent you? Now, is it the email and the phone call that are the problem, or is it your jerk boss? And what I found, one of the technologies that was mentioned most that people complained about, probably,
Email.
second to email was first.
Yeah.
Second to email was Slack or some kind of group chat.
Yeah.
And so I went to visit Slack. I actually went to Slack headquarters, and I was amazed that at 6:30, the office was empty and nobody uses Slack after work. That in fact, if you use Slack after work, you're reprimanded. But that doesn't really make sense, right? If Slack is this technology that's addicting everyone and tethering us to work and, distracting everybody, well, then nobody uses Slack more than the people who work at Slack. So they should all be the most distracted people on earth. But that's not what I found.
Totally.
And I didn't find that because they have a very healthy company work culture. At least they did when I went there. And so they exemplify these three traits of a company that gives employees psychological safety. They give them a place to talk about their problems. And most importantly, management exemplifies what it means to be indistractable. So when you walk into Slack company headquarters, you will see in pink letters, neon pink letters, they wrote this on the wall. It says, work hard and go home. It literally says that on the company walls. It's amazing. And everybody from the CEO on down exemplifies this idea of becoming indistractable. They believe that people need time to concentrate both at work, and they need time off after work as well to do their best.
Slack is one of the best tools. Like when I go into companies and help them with their operations, setting up Slack proper. I mean, in the book, you talk about email and stuff, the best and how to manage email. And for me, the best way to get to inbox zero is to get to email zero. And a lot of people have internal communication via email versus doing it in Slack, which is a far superior tool for internal company communication. But my only complaint about Slack, and I don't know why they do this, but the default notification preference in Slack is all, instead of it being direct message, right? Or mention. That's the only thing that I haven't understood. Everything else is great.
Yeah, no, and there's definitely room for improvement. I think with every tool, but I think this fundamental understanding that it's not the tool itself. It's totally really how it's used and in what context it's used in.
Oh, I mean, email. Like the quickest thing I found for companies to save time is cleaning up communication, because that's every company. That's the oxygen of a company. And if you teach people how to manage email and communication and Slack properly, and not it being a distraction, but being a productive, tool, that it's the quickest way. There's very little low hanging fruit. I found everyone likes to talk about automation and stuff, but cleaning up communication, I found to be the quickest magic pill to save 5+ hours a week for every team member in a company. Yeah, because I mean, just in terms of the sheer magnitude of how much time we spend with these tools. I mean, the average knowledge worker, you saw this in the book, but the average knowledge worker, if you exclude two things, email and meetings, is left with 1.5 hours a day for everything that is not emails and meetings. Insane. So what happens, right? When does real work get done? You know when it gets done. It gets done after work, nights and weekends. That's when we do our work, our real work. And that's crazy because somebody's going to pay a price. Who pays the price? Our kids pay the price, our relationships, our health. That's who pays the price when we're not able to focus and do one thing at a time. Right. No, and there's a lot of really, really cool tricks or tactics, let's call it, in the book that I wanted to share. But again, like I'm totally aligned with you that it's not the tool, it's how you use it. And the best way to manage email, instead of emailing your teammates, get Slack set up properly. Or you mentioned in the book agendas. We have we have a company policy that you mentioned in the book, no agenda, no meeting, which I really believe in.
Yes.
And one thing that's really cleaned up distractions in Slack for Leverage, my company, is we have a policy that if something's non-urgent and we have a meeting in the next week, add it to the agenda instead of pinging someone in Slack. And that's helped cut down a lot of noise as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
no, it's a great idea. And this goes back, there's many different ways. We're just talking about one of 4 big strategies, but now we're getting into the tactics. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that we can do to hack. This is called, the section is called how to hack back external triggers. External triggers are the pings, the dings, the rings, all the things that can prompt you towards distraction. And, people think, okay, here's how to change your iPhone settings. Here's how to change your computer settings. That's kindergarten stuff. I mean, give me a break. Like that's not very hard to figure out. You don't need a whole book to tell you that. What we do need is to realize that most of our distractions when it comes to these external triggers come from things that people don't think about. It comes from meetings, group chat, emails all day long. And one of the most pernicious sources of distraction when it comes to these external triggers, open floor plan offices. Oh my God, it saves companies a ton of money because they don't have to buy everyone their own office, but it is a hotbed of distraction.
Uh-huh.
And, some people say, oh, I put on headphones and I'm not bothered. People don't bother me. But here's the thing. When you put on headphones, people think you're watching YouTube. And so we want to send a clear message of what we are doing. And so in every copy of the book, you get what's called a screen sign. It's this red sign that says, I'm indistractable, please come back later. And that tells your colleagues, you put it on your monitor, and it tells your colleagues, I can't be bothered right now. Please come back a little bit later. And it sets this new cultural norm that, hey, you know what? It's okay to do focused work for some time in your day. And it's revolutionary. It really helps a lot. It seems simple, but it does a ton to help your employees know not to bother you. Because look, other people can be a source of external triggers. It's not just the pings and dings. People can be distractions as well.
Totally. I mean, the future of work is moving more and more remote. I mean, that's one problem of the open floor plan, but then also no one likes sitting in traffic for an hour each way every day. And people like the flexibility to be able to work from wherever off of a laptop. I mean, there's pros and cons to all this, but what you're mentioning is just another reason why I believe the future of work is more and more remote.
Yeah. And okay, so that's one thing, but then you have a whole nother problem with remote work is that when you don't have the social conformity of doing your work, then it's very easy to slack off. Then, of course, you may trade off coworkers for kids.
Yep.
I work from home, and let me tell you, like with an 11-year-old around the house, it's sometimes very hard to stay focused. So what do you do there? Well, there's a bunch of things you can do. So sometimes with kids, you have to be even more explicit. And so my wife has what we call the concentration crown. You probably saw a picture of it in the book. It's this light up little headpiece. It's like this little crown made of fake leaves, and it has these little LEDs in it. And it looks ridiculous, but that's by design, because when she puts it on, she only uses it at home, obviously. She doesn't use it outside the home. It's impossible to ignore. And when mommy is wearing the concentration crown, it tells our daughter, as well as myself, that my wife is not to be bothered. And it works like a charm. Another thing we do is we use a product called Focus Mate. And so this uses what's called a pact. A pact is this ancient technique, at least 2,500 years old, of making some kind of contract with yourself or with someone else to stay on task. And so Focus Mate is amazing. It's this tool that you go on, you're matched with another person at a particular time. It's kind of like chat roulette, but without all the dirty, nasty stuff. And so
I remember chat roulette.
Right? Exactly. So just like that, but for enterprise. So you sign up for a particular time, and you're matched with someone somewhere in the world who also needs to do focused work. And you show up, you say, okay, I'm working on this, I'm working on that, go. And you see a little video screen of someone else working. And it's amazing how that can keep you on task, particularly if you're the kind of person who has trouble getting started. If you work from home and you say, okay, 9 o'clock, I'm going to be at my desk, I'm going to crank out that big project. But then 9:15 rolls around, 9:30, you still haven't gotten to work. If you don't show up for that Focus Mate appointment, you're going to get a bad review, right? Like an Uber driver not getting 2 stars or something. And so that's a big incentive for you to show up, or you won't be able to use the platform anymore. And it is amazing. So it's ironic, of course, that the solution to tech distraction many times is more tech that fixes the bad aspects of the last generation of the technology.
Yeah, and speaking of it, there's a few other tools you mentioned in the book that I'm playing around with now. You have freedom.to, you have Forest app, and there's a few other cool indistractable apps, let's call it, and Chrome extensions to kind of force yourself to not do what you otherwise would naturally do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's all kinds of tools. And everyone who gets the book, I put up a website with about 50 different tools that we can use. Things like the Facebook newsfeed eradicator, right? I love Facebook. It's great. But here's the thing. Everyone knows that the newsfeed is designed to get you to engage, on end with the newsfeed.
It's awesome. I've been playing with that tool today.
It's great. So here's how it works. Basically, when you go on Facebook, and there's nothing wrong with Facebook, but here's the thing. We heard in the media so much that, Facebook is hijacking your brain. It's such bullshit. It's not hijacking. Give me a break. Hijacking is what they did to us on 9/11. This is not what Facebook does to us. Give me a break. But here's the thing. We have way more power than they do. How? Because we can hack back. Of course they are trying to hack our attention. That's their business model. Just like the New York Times is trying to hack your attention, and Fox News and CNN and this podcast. Everybody wants your attention. But that doesn't mean you can't do something about it. So what do? You hack back. How do you hack back? You install technologies that disable certain features of the last generation of technology. So now when I use Facebook, I love Facebook, but I don't want to see that stupid news feed that is designed to hook me in. Just like, when you go to the cash register, you see the National Enquirer and you read that, that Hillary Clinton had, sex with aliens or something, that you can't help but read these clickbaity headlines, even, they're ridiculous. And that's what Facebook is full of these days, but you don't have to see it anymore. You install this free Chrome extension.
It's called To Do Book, right?
No, well, that's one of them as well. Another one is called Facebook Newsfeed Eradicator, and it does exactly what it says. It eradicates the newsfeed, and it replaces it with an inspirational quote. So then you say, okay, well, how do you use Facebook then? Well, if I want to see how someone's doing, I will go to their specific page, and I'll check in with them, right? I'll see what's going on in their life. But I don't want this random assortment of junk. I'll just go to the people in my life who I really care about, check on their page, message whoever I need to message, and then I'm out of there.
Totally. One trick that I have been doing lately that I find helps me be less distracted is I turn off the colors on my phone and I make it black and white.
I don't think it works. No? I think it's terribly annoying. I've heard that technique before. I tried it, but let me not be so negative. Anything that I say, if you have a different technique that works for you, go for it. Do it.
Totally.
If it works, keep doing it. I tried it for a while and it got really annoying because every time I want to take a picture, I couldn't properly see what the picture is going to look like. And I think it's a little bit superficial. Like really, those little red circles are going to make such a difference. I don't buy it. I think what's much more effective is to hack back the external triggers by turning the external triggers that don't serve you off. Turns out 2/3 of people with a smartphone never change their notification settings. For real?
Yeah, that's like the part of your book where it was, move the most critical apps to kind of page one. And even more so, the real most critical one should be in the dock, and then turning off notifications is kind of step one when you take it out of the box.
Yeah, that's really kindergarten stuff. It turns out most people don't do it. 2/3 of people never do it. But that's kind of easy. You can that chapter is only like 3 pages in the entire book. It's kindergarten stuff, but it's important to do. And again, whatever works for you, but it has to be done. You have to remove the external triggers that don't serve you from your calendar. From your computer, from your phone. But I think what is a much more common source of distraction are not the external triggers, but the internal triggers, right? This desire to escape discomfort. If you don't fundamentally learn tools to deal with your boredom, your loneliness, your insecurity, your fatigue, your stress, your anxiety, no distraction is going to be foolproof. You will still get distracted. You'll read something. You'll organize your desk. You'll take out your trash. You'll gossip with someone. You'll find a distraction if you don't deal with how you manage these uncomfortable emotional states. That's the most important step. Everything else is gravy.
Have you ever tried nootropics or Adderall or Modafinil? What's it? Modafinil is the other one?
No. I mean, I think if you want to try that kind of stuff because you've been diagnosed with a pathology like ADHD or whatever, then that might be something that you consider. The book wasn't specifically written for anyone with a pathology, nor do I think we need these substances, frankly. I mean, if you do have a pathology, it's a different story. You need help from a professional. But you may find these techniques helpful, but this book wasn't written for people with ADD. It was really written for everyone. And so no ingestibles needed.
Back to your point a minute ago about, whatever works for you. Like I speak a lot about how to manage inbox properly. And when I got to the part of your book, it was interesting because we have a similar way of thinking about it, but different. You're executing and managing your inbox in a slightly different way. And it's fine. Like it works for you, but you're labeling emails as kind of today or this week, just to distinguish like now or not now kind of. And I'm doing something similar, but there was a tool you also mentioned called Mixmax, which is a tool I use. Mm-hmm. And anything that's not now, I snooze to a day that I feel that it's most appropriate. So rather than just saying this week, I might designate kind of Mondays to be kind of my catch-all day, and I'll snooze it to Monday as an example.
Yeah.
It's achieving similar stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think so after you master the internal triggers, that always has to be the most important step. And I give you several tactics to use for how we can start managing those internal triggers so that we're not slaves to our feelings. We can deal with them in a healthier manner as opposed to, letting them lead us to distraction. So after you've done that, the second step that you can't skip is really about making time for traction. That one of the most important lessons for me in the book is that you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So if you have big open swaths of white space in your day, you know what's going to happen, right? Facebook's going to eat up that time. Instagram's going to eat up that time. Your work is going to eat up that time. Something is going to eat up that time unless you decide for yourself what you want to do with it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have fun, right? I'm not saying you should be an automaton all day and all you should do is work every day and be productive. No. I'm saying you should make time to live out your values. If your values include taking care of your body, where is that time on your schedule? If your values include spending time with your friends or family, where's that time on your schedule? If it includes doing focused work where you can actually think for a little bit, then that needs to be on your calendar as well. Then we get to the part around email, because we find that the problem with email, the reason it scatters our attention so much is because we're using it, whenever we want to. And that's really a bad idea. What we want to do is to have time in our calendars, just like everything else that's important to us, to check email. Because what we find, there's a few things that happen when it comes to these studies around how potentially distracting and how much of a time waster email can be. We find that there's a few places when it really is a big old waste of time. Number one, we know that 25% of the emails you send, the average knowledge worker doesn't need to send, and 25% of the emails that you receive, you didn't need to receive. So there's a huge waste of time going on there. Another big waste of time is that if you look at, from a time management perspective, where we waste time on email, it's not so much the checking, it's not the replying, it's the rechecking. That's where we waste time. Why? Because, email has this variable rewards component, kind of like a slot machine where you're constantly checking it based on, what's going to be in the email, and is it good news, is it bad news? It's just like playing a slot machine. It's a lot of variability. The problem is we forget what's in those emails. So, how often does this happen? You open an email, you read it, you say, okay, put that away. You open the next email, read it, put it away. And then a few minutes later, you say, wait, what was that in that email again? Right. And what was, I forgot exactly what was about it. So next time there's a rule with email where you have to touch every email only twice. The first time, your job is to look for the most important detail, which is, from a time management perspective, one question, the answer to one question. That one question is, when does this email need a reply? That's the only thing you care about when you read that email. When does it need a reply? If it doesn't need a reply ever, you delete or archive it. If it needs a reply like right this minute, something that somebody should have texted you or called you about, okay, your hair's on fire, fix that problem. But 99% of your emails will fall into one of two categories. Either it'll be something you need to respond to today, so it's rather urgent, or something that can be responded to within the span of about a week's time. Okay? So once you've done that, now back to step 2, where you have a time box calendar. Now what we want to do is to only answer the emails that we have marked, that we have labeled as today. And we have time on our calendar to reply to the urgent messages, only the ones that need to reply to today. And that's going to be about 10 to 20% of your daily email load. Now, what about all those other emails? You mark them as something that needs to reply to sometime this week. And then you have a big old block a time on your calendar when you're going to flush through all those emails that can be replied to sometime this week. So for me, I call it Message Mondays. I have 3.5 hours every Monday when I work through all those messages that can wait. Well, okay. Now somebody's thinking, yeah, but what's the point? I mean, I'm just going to have to go through those emails later on. No. That's the thing. When you let email marinate, okay, when you just let it chill out for a little bit, what most people do, they play this stupid ping pong game where they constantly reply back and forth without asking themselves, wait a minute, does this actually need a reply today? Because you know what's going to happen. You reply to an email, it's going to come right back to you with another response.
Right. There's a boomerang effect to email.
Exactly. So you want to slow it down. And what you will find is that a good chunk of your emails, maybe about a third of your emails every week, don't even need a reply anymore. People figured out their own problems. The problem's no longer important because it got crushed under the weight of some other priority. And so giving email a little bit of space, the ones that don't need an urgent reply, is a wonderful practice. So we label our emails, and then we only check the emails based on when they need a reply, either today, and we have time in our calendar for that, or sometime this week. We have a bigger block when we go through those non-urgent messages.
And the same thing I found happen in my company with the whole rule, don't Slack me, put it on the agenda. When you let an idea marinate and it's put on the agenda, over 50% of the time, it's been removed from the agenda before the meeting because it worked itself out, right?
Absolutely.
And another benefit too of batching your emails and kind of having that longer block on a Monday is, big productivity principle is batching. You don't do your laundry every time one pair of socks gets dirty. So if you are constantly just back and forth in email, it's going to be far more distracting and less productive than if you just block off 3 hours and you just get done with it.
Absolutely.
And a big thing I think people mistake with emails, they think, a lot of people I work with think that they're at inbox 0, but they're at unread 0. And to your point earlier, your eye is still being distracted. You're still looking at that email. It's not the same as just clearing it out. David Allen has that, I think it's called the 2-minute rule or something, that if an email, if you could deal with it within 2 minutes, just do it and get it out of there.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like it because I think that was great back when email was something you did at your desk only. Yeah. I think in the mobile era, it's a big mistake. And the mobile era, because we constantly have access to our devices, people follow this rule of the 2-minute rule that David Allen espouses. But here's the thing. You know how it works. 2 minutes for this email and 2 minutes for that email and 2 minutes for this email. And now it's 30 minutes of email.
If you get a couple hundred emails a day, that adds up.
Exactly. And so they think, I'm just 2 minutes. And they do this all freaking day. And that means they have no time for anything else because they're constantly, according to the 2-minute rule, checking these emails. And so I think that doesn't work anymore in the mobile age.
Well, you bring up a good point. I find my workflow is totally different on mobile, and I'll use mobile to read and archive email, but respond far less by mobile, right? Because for me, it's much easier to read, but if something needs my concentration and reply, that I'm typically doing in desktop. So I use my time on mobile, like if I'm in a cab, to just kind of clear out the garbage, right? To clear space for deeper thinking kind of responses and work when I get to a desktop.
Sure. So I think that in between time, first of all, we want to be careful. I'll tell you why in a minute. These are called liminal moments. Liminal moments are these time between times, right? So between our tasks. So after one meeting, we got to get back to our desk or whatever, or we're commuting around town or whatever. Sure, that's a good time to label your messages and get them out of your inbox and into some kind of color label. And we're not talking. I'm not talking about subjects. I hate that technique where we label things by subjects. Also, not necessary anymore. We have such good
like that either.
Search engine capabilities. We don't need to label by topic
or a million folders.
Yeah, it doesn't. It used to make sense back when searching for stuff was hard, but today search is so easy and so powerful that we don't need to do that. But what you can do during those liminal moments between tasks is to simply move the stuff that hasn't been read into one of those two categories of get to today or get to sometime this week. But we want just a word of warning around that. These liminal moments can sometimes be very dangerous because when if you're at the red light and you're bored there waiting for the 30 seconds for the light to turn green, you often are tempted to take out your phone and just do a quick thing on it. Or you're coming back from one meeting and you're about to sit down at your desk. So you're just going to do that one thing on Slack. And the problem is that many times we keep doing it. And so that's very dangerous. We want, it's dangerous in the car if we're trying and drive while we're checking email. It's also dangerous in the office environment when we say, okay, I had the thing that I was going to start, but let me just finish what I started on the way over. So we want to be careful. It's better to even plan that time of, okay, I'm going to work on something for 45 minutes, and as part of my 15-minute break, to make sure that there's nothing, that needs my attention right away, I'm going to check my email, put my mind at ease by simply labeling as today or tonight, and making sure that there's nothing on fire that I need to attend to.
Yeah, that's totally. And you talked in the book about sending later, and that was really interesting to me because I've used it, but for different reasons. I used the send later that's built into Mixmax to maximize kind of the chance of someone opening it. Like if I have an idea on a Friday night, I don't want people, necessarily to get it on Friday night or Saturday or Sunday when the odds are that they're away. So I'll do a send later so they get it Monday morning.
Yes.
But you brought up a good point. Aside from that, the whole boomerang effect and sending later as a strategy to manage being distracted was really interesting to me too.
Yeah, I mean, this formula, I call it TNT. So the big T in TNT stands for the total time you spend on email equals the time you spend per email times the number of emails you receive every day. So TNT, and it reminds you that email can explode a perfectly productive day if you don't manage it correctly. And so the rule here is if you want to get fewer emails per day, you have to send fewer emails per day. And so that's why that rule is so important. So by sending something later, so every time I send an email, I ask myself, when is the latest the person needs to see this? Because I don't want them to respond right away, right? Because then that means now I have another thing to do before I want to do it. So there's nothing wrong with slowing your roll a bit, right? So I love your point around how, part of email etiquette is not to send people email on Friday afternoon. Use send later so that they'll get it Monday morning. They don't have to be bothered with it over the weekend if it's not super urgent. So that's good email etiquette, but it also serves you because if you want to receive fewer emails, you have to send fewer emails in a given period of time.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So where you mentioned earlier that there was a URL that people could get additional resources from the book. Do you mind just to mention where people could find out about that and again, like where they could get the book?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my blog is at nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, N-I-R, and far.com. So nirandfar.com. And for the website, for the book specifically, it's at indistractable.com. And there's an 80-page workbook that's complimentary that we couldn't fit into the book. The book got too long, so we decided to take it out. But it's a great workbook that makes it very practical for you to become indistractable yourself. And that's complimentary at indistractable.com. That's I-N, the word distract, A-B-L-E, indistractable.com.
Sorry, Nir, I got distracted for a second. No pun intended. I just realized there was one question that I wanted to ask you, actually, that I forgot to ask you, even though that would have been a good ending to the podcast just now. How do you analyze your time? So I know that you probably, I would imagine, quarterly or some cadence, you say, okay, these are the priorities in my life. This is how much time I want to spend with close friends, with family, in email, et cetera, right? I guess, how often do you do that kind of audit of your time?
Yeah, so this is called a schedule sync, and it's critical to do. I do it. You want to do it as frequently as your schedule changes. Yeah. So for the average person, that's going to be about once a week. Yeah. So you want to sit down and you want to make a time boxed calendar. And I built a tool that everyone can use. I'll give you a link for the show notes because I wasn't really happy with how difficult it is to do this in Google Calendar or Outlook. So I built a really, really simple tool that helps you see for yourself how you want to spend your time. And so I do this every week. Most people can do it every week. Some people, they say, oh my God, every day is different. Well, that's fine. You just need to do this once a day. It doesn't take you anywhere near as long. You're not planning out your week. You're just planning out your day. But you need to have some kind of template because the idea here is if you don't know how you want to spend your time, you can't call something a distraction. Everything is a distraction, right? You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So you have to tell me, oh, I wanted to do X, but then I did Y. That's the only way to know if you're distracted, or else everything is a distraction. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be, militant to everything. I have to abide by the minute. No, it means that for any given minute, what did you plan to do? What is traction and what is distraction for any minute of your day? And that's why this is such an essential practice. By the way, Every C-level executive I talk to already does this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the rest of us need to adopt this practice as well. It seems like, oh, it's a lot of work. I don't want to do it. Too bad. This is the reality of modern life. Living in the 21st century, you don't have to chop your own wood. You don't have to kill your own food. You have to make a schedule, or else here's the thing. Somebody's going to make a schedule for you. Mm-hmm. It's going to be what Donald Trump just tweeted. It's going to be, what your boss wants this minute. It's going to be what your kid demands of you. If you don't make your plan for your day, somebody's going to make it for you.
And your tool, does it kind of graphically show you where you're allocating time, or is it a place where you could create does it, if things change and your schedule changes, is it able to tell you at the end of the week, hey, this is how much time you spent working out versus in email?
No, I think that's too much. Okay. We don't need to analyze. We don't need to obsess. People spend too much time. I think some people either spend too much time or too little time on this. All this is for is to give us a template so that in the minute, there's no willpower needed. I hate willpower. I hate self-discipline. I hate self-control. It doesn't work. I'm sick of people telling me that to lose weight, use willpower. To do what you want, use willpower. Bullshit. It doesn't work in the moment.
My friend Ben Hardy wrote a book called Willpower Doesn't Work, just about that.
It doesn't. That's exactly right. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work because in the moment, we don't have free will. What we do have is free choice. Free choice means that the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. There is nothing that we can't do if we plan for it in advance. So if the chocolate cake is on the fork on its way to your mouth, it's too late. You've lost. If the cigarette is lit and it's in your hand and you're about to take a puff, you're going to smoke. If the phone is next to you in the morning because you sleep next to your cell phone, the first thing you're going to do is pick it up as opposed to kissing your loved one and saying good morning. They're going to win. They're going to get you. Because you can't leave these decisions to the moment. You have to plan a system in advance to make sure you don't do something you don't want to do. And so that's the single and only purpose of this calendar template, is to tell you for every minute of your day what is traction and what is distraction. Traction is anything that you plan to do in advance. Anything that is not that is a distraction. Even something productive. One of the most pernicious forms of distraction is the kind of distraction that tricks us, right? We sit down at our desk and we say, oh, we're going to do that big project. We're going to do that thing that we've been procrastinating on right after I check email, right? Mm-hmm. That happens all the time because, hey, email is kind of productive. Email is something kind of worky, right? No, it's pseudo work, because anything that is not what you plan to do is a distraction. And email, if it's not when you plan to check it, is also a distraction.
That was really profound. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, everyone listening, go and buy the book, Indistractable. It's awesome. It's a quick read. Nir is super smart and awesome. And thank you so much for joining us today. One more time, what's the website that people could go to?
Sure. It's nirandfar.com. Nir spelled like my first name, N-I-R. Or you can go to indistractable.com, and that's spelled I-N, the word distract, A-B-L-E, indistractable.com.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast from getleverage.com. Please let us know what you think. Rate and subscribe on iTunes. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can help set up marketing and sales funnels, your email marketing, podcasts, social media creation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit getleverage.com.